the model that was set by the lies about Brexit, or even the ignorance, it's difficult to know the difference, are now coming home to roost. You can ignore the evidence of your eyes and ears, but you can't make it go away. You can't change reality. You can try, and of course, if you have a sufficiently totalitarian regime, you can sort of impose an alternative reality upon your population. One thinks of Joseph Stalin or Pol Pot, perhaps, or more recently, more modernly, Kim Jong-un, possibly to a certain extent, Saddam Hussein. You can or Donald Trump, of course, has persuaded half the country, or at least a significant swathe of Americans, that maths doesn't matter and that numbers don't do what they have been doing since the ancient times, and that he actually won the election, which he lost. So you can, if you are a demagogue of sufficient depravity, you can persuade people to believe things that are categorically not true. But usually the truth will eventually emerge. And Brexit being this sort of, what would you call it, the platform upon which this entire government is built, is now becoming unignorable. The realities of Brexit are beginning to bite. The most passionate supporters of it are already reduced to saying, well, that's not as bad as it could have been, therefore we win. I mean, it's worse than it was before, but it's not as bad as it could have been. We win. Imagine any other context in that, where you lose a game 10-1 and you find a pundit who predicted 10-0 and start, dancing around his house waving placards saying, ha, 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 you know nothing. Your team's just lost 10-1. Yeah, you scored one goal and you're behaving as if you've won the FA Cup. Oh, that's still a bit close to the bone, that actually. Oh, I wonder when I'll get over that. When will that wound heal, I wonder? Probably never. If you don't know what I'm talking about, now's not the time. But it is insane, isn't it? The way in which people now are arguing. There you go. You can still eat. I'm not eating grass. Therefore, it was a brilliant idea to impose economic sanctions on ourselves. I've still got a house. I've still got a job. And we've got the biggest cost of living crisis since records began on our doorstep. But hey-ho, I'm not eating grass. So Brexit was a brilliant idea. Until, of course, the Public Accounts Committee come along and pull even that rug from under your feet. Because UK firms have been hit by increased costs, paperwork and border delays as a direct consequence of Brexit. In fact, the Public Accounts Committee, which I would remind you is made up of MPs from all parties, has essentially said that the only impact they can find is negative. The warning is also there that things could worsen, okay? Could, crucial word, things could worsen. Doesn't mean they will. And then if they don't, that's not a win because they've already worsened. So things have got worse and they could get even worse. If at some point subsequent to now they don't get even worse, you don't come back and say, well, they got worse, but they didn't get even worse. Therefore, it was a good idea to do the thing that made things worse. 11 minutes after 10, and I can't believe I still need to explain this stuff. And of course, here's the exact quote, the only detectable impact so far is increased costs, paperwork and border delays. And that, of course, is exclusively on trade. You find lots of other impacts if you're looking at labour shortages everywhere from lorry drivers to the NHS. And the problem, of course, is that they either lied to you or they genuinely didn't understand what it was that they were saying, which makes the appointment yesterday of Jacob Rees-Mogg as the Minister for Brexit Opportunities and something with the acronym GE, Government Efficiency, which, yeah, come on. We're all schoolboys, really, aren't we? It makes him the official Minister for Bogies. He is charged with looking for Brexit opportunities 6 years after telling you that voting for Brexit would be a really good idea, and slightly fewer years, 3, 4 or 5 years after telling you, well, I'll play you a couple of things that demonstrate just how wrong he is or was, and indeed always will be, about what he sold you in 2016. We'll begin with a little interview he gave to Susanna Reid at Good Morning Britain, in which he demonstrates not only a complete ignorance of what would be rendered inevitable by leaving the single market, but also a rather arrogant belief that he's the one that understands things.
In 2017, 44% of UK exports went to the EU. 53% of all UK imports came from the EU. New trade deals with other countries will take years to sign. They will not compensate for our loss of trade with our biggest trade partner.
Well, what loss of trade?
Well, because if we put tariffs up and costs go up and we put barriers in and we lose just-in-time transporting, we're putting up massive obstacles.
But why are we going to put up these obstacles?
Because you're suggesting we come off a cliff edge? on the
No, it's
29th
just-
and we don't have a deal.
I'm sorry to say this is all complete invention. There is no reason for the British to put any obstacles to imports from the European Union when we leave. None at all. No tariffs, no non-tariff barriers. Indeed, it's an opportunity to reduce tariffs and tariff barriers against the rest of the world, cutting the cost of imports from the rest of the world, which are very often more competitive than those coming from the European Union. So it's a really exciting opportunity for us. And you're assuming, if I may say so, that the government would decide to punish the UK for leaving. Why would any government do that?
I think, to be fair, he doesn't understand. I don't think he's lying. He just doesn't understand what he's talking about, which makes his promotion to Minister for Brexit Opportunities a couple of years after he got everything wrong in that interview that you just heard even more remarkable and yet at the same time typical. So a sort of perfect reflection of where we are as a country. Here is a bloke, because every time he said if, that's now become when. So if that's all now happened, and he said it wouldn't happen, so how on earth can he still be selling the thing that he said wouldn't cause the things that it has now caused? It's a complete mystery. And then, of course, there's Northern Ireland. Now, if you've read the Good Friday Agreement, it is impossible to come away from that document not understanding that you need regulatory alignment on both sides of the invisible Irish border. Otherwise, you will need a border in the Irish Sea. If it's part of a country that is not in the single market or the customs union. I don't know why I struggled to explain this to people. I think I underestimated how desperate they were to believe things that weren't true. So the fact that the actual words regulatory alignment don't appear in the Good Friday Agreement means that people could say, well, the Good Friday Agreement doesn't insist upon regulatory alignment. They could say that right up until the point that we put a border in the Irish Sea because there needs to be regulatory alignment on the island of Ireland. Now, I understood that pretty early on. You understood that pretty early on, unless you were swallowing the gristle and the gammon that was being served up to you by these people. Jacob Rees-Mogg probably still doesn't understand it, as he demonstrated in an interview with one of Britain's best-loved broadcasters.
Talking about the withdrawal agreement,
Yes.
It is a Remainers Brexit.
What does that mean?
It means that it's shadowing membership of the European Union. It's half in, half out. That it would tie us into the common external tariff. It would tie us in via Northern Ireland to the EU's rule book in vast swathes of activity.
And when people warned that the Good Friday Agreement would render that inevitable, why do you think they were dismissed?
Because it doesn't.
So regulatory alignment isn't in the Good Friday Agreement?
No, it isn't.
Okay. It is.
No, it isn't. It's not a matter of the Good Friday Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement wasn't considering those sorts of issues.
You don't think the Good Friday Agreement insists on regulatory alignment on both sides of the Irish border?
No, it doesn't.
I love the laugh. You've got to admire his chutzpah, if that's the correct word to use. And that's why I don't think he's actually lying when he says that stuff. I think he is just, spectacularly ignorant, because as we have subsequently discovered, safeguarding regulatory alignment on the island of Ireland was an absolute prerequisite of the Good Friday Agreement. But because if you did, a Google search for the actual words regulatory alignment, you could somehow, before reality bit, you could somehow claim that it wasn't a prerequisite.